Under One Roof MTL, hosted by Robin Flynn, featuring mortgage brokers Fred and Martin and real estate expert LJ Aguinaga. Presented by Fred and Martin Mortgages and LJ Realties.
Good afternoon. It is 12:05. You're listening to Under One Roof MTL on CJD 800. I'm Robin Flynn with Martin Spalding and LJ Aguinaga from Fred and Martin Mortgages and LJ Realties. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How's everybody doing?
We're just being very, very, very polite today.
Yes, exactly. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
I want to kick things off with our trivia question because we do have a very special guest joining us in just a moment. So let's get that trivia question in. Brought to you by Felix and Norton Cookies. They're at the Blue Haven Shopping Center on St. John's Boulevard in DDO. The first person to text in the correct response to 514-800 is going to receive delicious cookies from Felix and Norton delivered straight to their door. Our question this week, what's the legal name for welcome tax? You know, when you purchase a property, you have to pay a welcome tax. What is it actually called? That's just the nickname for it.
But the question is, do you really feel welcome when you get that tax and when you have to pay that tax?
Welcome to the neighborhood. You owe us $3,000.
$3,000? That's very generous.
I just picked a random number.
Okay, no. Nowadays it's 7, 10, 12.
Well, I
21.
bought my house like 5 years ago in Chattagee. Things were a little different back then. If you think you know the answer, 514-800, please do include your first name as well. Now, this is great because there was a news story that all of us saw this week that kind of blew our minds about a Montreal tenant who's being forced to pay his landlord's taxes. We were like, guys, we need to talk about this. And it turns out, Martin, you actually know the guy?
Well, you know what? I'm still dumbfounded. So I've read this article 2 or 3 times now in preparation for the show. But when I first read it for the first time, I was sitting there going, it just seems really unfair.
Yeah.
And this could probably happen to 90% of the population in Montreal who are renters.
Yep.
And as I was reading through the story, I go, oh, my God, I know this guy. And he's actually very well known in Montreal. It's David Siscoe.
Who used to work at CJD.
Exactly.
Back in the day.
So we reached out to David and we said, David, would you be ready to share your story with the CJD listenership? Because I think it's an important story to be told.
Absolutely.
Because you could easily get blindsided. And I really feel that the CRA, the Canadian Revenue Agency, has treated this whole file very unfairly. So I think we've got David on the line.
We do. David Siscoe, who used to work at CJD, he's the tenant in the story that we all read in the Globe and Mail this week, and he joins us now. Hey, David, how's it going?
Excellent, Robin. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Did you actually verify that everybody read that story?
Every single, I walked on the street and I asked every Montrealer I saw, did you read that Globe and Mail story?
Yeah.
Okay, let's take a few steps back here. Walk us through what happened. How did you find out that, you've been renting this apartment and hey, you actually owe a ton of taxes?
So what happened was I got an assessment from the CRA. And as soon as I saw what the assessment was for, I then obviously immediately got in touch with the landlord, and she assured me that that it was going to be all taken care of course, I said, well, CRA is telling me you actually did not file at all, and so she's like, no, I'm going to do it. And you know what she actually did? She filled out forms. Your income tax forms, but just the papers. And thought that she could fool me by saying, no, I submitted these.
Wow.
But of course, that's not the assessment. That's just blank papers.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was saying, no, I submitted these, but she never did.
Jeez. Which
is crazy. Anyway, so that's how I first found out about it. And no matter how many times this went back and forth, she insisted she was going to be taking care of this. Never did. So I obviously I was blown away, and to this day, by the way, I'm still blown away that they came after a tenant to pay somebody else's taxes.
But David, you'd been living there for 20 years, right?
24 years.
24 years.
Yeah.
And now, subsequent to this, you've actually had to move out. So you've incurred additional costs of moving because you had no intention of moving out of there. And so where did things change? At one point, the landlord said to you, according to the article, can you make the checks payable to my sister?
Okay, so listen to how sketchy this started to get. First it was, can you make the checks payable to my sister? And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not paying you anything until this gets rectified. And then she said, well, you can, I said, CRA is coming after me for 25% of everything I've paid to you over the past 6 years. And so she said, well, okay, so then just pay me in cash. They won't know. I'm like, wait, you think I'm party to this? Like, you think I want to be paying 6 years of your filing for taxes? You're crazy.
I mean, you're just an individual renting an apartment, and all of a sudden this bomb is dropped on you. Right. I'm sure if this could happen to you, it could. I'm looking at LJ as I'm saying this.
Think about how many foreigners particularly own property across Canada, Toronto, Vancouver, right? And so the insinuation is that the tenant, whatever they have to pay in their rent, is supposed to remit 25% to CRA. So it's not costing the tenant anything more other than, of course, the tenant has to take care of the accounting. But outside of that, you're still paying the same total amount. So the insinuation by CRA is that I chose to pay this landlord the full amount and gladly was willing to incur her non-payment of taxes. I mean, it's just so mind-boggling.
Yeah, no kidding.
Nonsensical.
We're in conversation with David Siscoe. He found out that he was responsible for the taxes on the apartment that he was renting. He had to pay the taxes that his landlord hadn't paid. So let's walk back a little bit why this happened, because this isn't the case for every tenant. This specifically was a landlord who is not based in Canada, right, LJ?
That's correct. And it's important to note that people can also change their residency status, right? So it depends on are you a non-resident for tax purposes? Mm-hmm. So you might even ask for ID and you might get a Canadian passport and assume like, okay, yeah, they're Canadian. They might even put a Canadian address on the lease itself. But it really depends on, are they still filing taxes in Canada or not? And it's absolutely mind-boggling that the tenant is responsible for this, because you're supposed to ask each landlord for a copy of their financial statements effectively for their tax return, their T1 general. Are they filing NR4s and R6s? It becomes very, very difficult to track, and this is really surprising. But I'm looking at our list right now. I'd say about almost a third of our clients are non-residents for tax purposes.
Really?
On the property management side.
Yeah,
Wow.
if I may jump in here, LJ, so ask any layperson if they can define the difference between a Canadian resident and a tax resident, because it's apparently one heck of a difference.
And that's why I'm so shocked by this. To be honest, on April 13th, one of our clients actually sent us this article that the Globe and Mail ran, but for Vancouver based, and they wanted to double check that we had actually been obviously collecting and remitting on our client's behalf. And I just double checked with this client, because while we do handle it for most of our non-resident clients, some of them have opted to do it directly with their own accountants. And I sent the email to double check and confirm, and we got the confirmation. Everybody slept easy, but it's definitely triggered a lot of people knowing that some of their landlords are abroad. But our lease itself obviously showed that the landlord was not in Canada. We had all the different addresses. It was maybe a bit more thorough, but I can't imagine expecting any normal Canadian to go through this due diligence and process. It's shocking.
That they aren't even aware that they have to go through this. David, before we wrap up, I want to find out, how much do you owe and how long do you have to pay it back?
So the total amount I still don't know. I know it's $43,000, but on that there's going to be penalties and interests. Oh. Plus whatever the legal fees, but I can also perhaps add to this that in the 24 years I was there, you have to know that the landlord apparently used to live in Montreal. Like, the lease I have has an address from the West Island on it.
Wow.
But apparently then moved at some point, and I was supposed to know this magically.
There's no way. It doesn't make any sense.
No, there's no way, because nothing changed in terms of the way the payments were always issued.
Wow.
And so it's and as I think LJ alluded to this earlier, what are you supposed to do? Turn around and say to the landlord, I need to see your last assessment for your taxes to prove that you're paying tax. No landlord would provide that.
And even as such, the person could change their status from one year to the next, and then you're on the hook for 12 months all of a sudden, because you're waiting 12 months before you get the next assessment.
And so even going through this whole court case, I can tell you to this day, I still don't know what a tenant needs to do to say we've done enough to protect ourselves. I mean, other than I think it would be amazing if enough people complain. My understanding is this is what we're supposed to do now. And I didn't learn this in court. I've learned this from one of our local MPs here in Montreal, Anthony Housefather, is that we've got to reach out to the MPs to try and get a change or an amendment made, because this law is from 1932. I am the first tenant they've ever gone after.
Jeez.
And I think that they might be setting precedent, because I think that if the public does not react to this, then they may have just found a new revenue stream to go after.
David Siscoe, I am so sorry that you're going through this. Let's keep in touch, because I would love to have an update from you maybe in a few months to find out how this all shakes out. Thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Truly a pleasure.
Thanks, David.
Whoa,
thank you so much.
Geez, the time is 12:16 right now. You're listening to Under One Roof MTL on CJD 800. That's just an awful story. I know, and like especially with all of the competition for rental units, if you start asking a landlord, well, can I see what you filed for? He's just not going to consider you for the apartment anymore. He's going to go to somebody else.
There's no chance.
There's a reference to a legal website, and as a property management company, do you actually do the following? Do you do a land title search on the landlord? Do you ask for a landlord certificate of residency? It's just the list is long. I'm signing a lease because I want to move into the apartment. I'm not going to go and do all this. And I'm not even sure property management companies actually do that. So we'll talk about it when we come back.
Absolutely. Still to come, we're going to talk a little bit more about all of this and what property management companies are actually doing.
Under One Roof MTL, hosted by Robin Flynn, featuring mortgage brokers Fred and Martin and real estate expert LJ Aguinaga. Presented by Fred and Martin Mortgages and LJ Realties.
This is your lingo lexicon on Under One Roof MTL. Property manager. A property manager is someone who takes care of all the nitty-gritty details involved in renting out a property, like finding tenants, collecting rent, and handling repairs and maintenance. They basically make life easier for property owners by handling the day-to-day stuff so they don't have to. For example, let's say Mark owns a few rental properties in Montreal, but he lives in Toronto right now. He could hire a property manager to handle everything from advertising vacancies to screening tenants to coordinating repairs and handling tenant concerns. This way, Mark can focus on other things while knowing his properties are in good hands. If you're interested in working with a property manager, you can always get in touch with LJ and his team at 514-709-6397. This has been your Lingo Lexicon on Under One Roof MTL.
That was the perfect segue from the conversation that we were just having with David Siscoe. I want to take it back a little bit because we are getting some texts asking how this happened in the first place. People have a lot of questions. So we're going to answer your questions. Basically, the story is about a Montreal tenant who found out he was on the hook for property taxes for the apartment he'd been renting for 24 years. He owed 6 years of back taxes that his landlord had not been paying. And for some reason, the CRA was able to go after him, and now he's on the hook for $43,000 plus penalties, plus legal fees, because he did try to challenge this in court. So, LJ, can you explain how this happened in the first place?
Okay, when somebody is a non-resident for tax purposes, so they can be a Canadian citizen, doesn't change that, but they are no longer filing their regular taxes here, they still have to do a small filing because they're receiving rental income in Canada. And the form that needs to be filled out is called the NR4 form, the non-resident 4 form. And essentially the way it works is that the landlord or the property manager or whoever is managing the accounts, it could be an accountant, is required to remit 25% of gross rents every single month. So every month I collect all the rents for our clients, and then for the non-residents, we pay 25% of their income directly to the CRA, and then they keep track of it all year. And at the end of the year, they basically do the plus and minus of their actual income versus expenses, and then they remit as necessary. Now, somebody, like a tenant, there's no way they know about this. I only learned about this whole mechanism when I started doing property management for non-residents. If it wasn't for that, I'd been in real estate for another 12 years before that, and I'd never heard about this. I do know that when somebody sells a property who's a non-resident, all the funds are essentially frozen. Notary holds back about 50% until they get a certificate from the CRA stating that all taxes have been cleared and it's good to go. So it shocks me and boggles my mind that they didn't just put a lien on this property right away and go through the same mechanism that they already have in place to make sure that all taxes are paid from a capital gains perspective and just recapture this non-resident tax withholding that wasn't paid.
And in this case, the landlord did sell the property. Like, there was a major missed opportunity. It's like the CRA were the ones that made the mistake in this case.
They dropped the ball and they're putting the onus on Mr. Simcoe, which is absolutely crazy.
Unbelievable.
No, it makes absolutely no sense to me, because we know how many apartments in Montreal or across Canada are owned by non-residents. And how if, obviously if there's a property manager, about these rules. But if I'm Joe Smith renting an apartment, I'm supposed to go through all the due diligence to make sure that my non-resident landlord is actually paying their taxes. And if they're not, I'm going to withhold 25% of my rent and hold it for them so that they can pay the CRA at the end of the year. So I'm not holding the bag. That's just lunacy to me.
And if you make a mistake on this, they're going to take you to the rental board because you haven't been paying your full rent and they want to know what's going on that front. Like, it's lose-lose here. It doesn't make any sense.
And then that'll show up on your credit report because you didn't pay your rent. And this is like a domino effect.
Of course.
And how is a tenant? I rented apartments for a very, very long time, from the time I was 18
I think we all
till
did.
Exactly. Everybody has. I had no idea. I wouldn't even have known what questions to ask in the first place. And like I mentioned briefly before traffic, whenever an apartment goes up for rent, there's a news story now about the lineup around the block of people trying to see this apartment.
So if you're going to be a difficult renter, what do you think the landlord is going to say? I'm not going to do that. You want the place or you don't want the place?
He's got 100 other people who are in the running who aren't asking difficult questions.
And I think that's an important story to tell, because we think that July 1st this year is going to be a nightmare. So if you haven't started looking for your apartment, start looking now if you need a place by July 1st.
We've been hearing ads on the radio, seeing them on TV, on social media. This is the same story every year in Montreal, that July 1st comes and there's people who have nowhere to live. Have absolutely nowhere to live. And the city has to find temporary solutions, give them money to help find them places. There's a program in place, I believe, where they'll find a place for them and pay the difference in the rent every month so that they can actually have a roof over their heads, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe, that's what the article was saying. It sounds like a great program. I also know I think they put something like $7 million aside to help with that program this year. However, what was interesting about the article is that they mentioned that a decent chunk of that is going to see if these people have psychological issues. They want to kind of spin it on, if you weren't able to find housing, it must be because of a psychological issue, not because of repossession, not because of bad luck, not because of a variety of factors. And that's what actually really upset a lot of the activists on this front, saying we just need money to help people find housing. Assuming that everybody who's struggling to find a new place to live is having a psychological issue is completely out of left field.
No, a lot of the time it's a renoviction, or somebody's moving their family member into the house, or they need more space. Especially if you have pets, it's really, really hard to find an apartment. Every lease out there says no pets, no pets, no pets. I had a cat and I really struggled with that when I was trying to find an apartment. So
could we go back to property management, because this is fascinating to me. So if I own, let's say, a duplex, and I turn to you, LJ, and I go, can you manage the place for me? Because I don't want to get called at 3 a.m. if the toilet is overflowing. I don't want to have to collect the checks on a monthly basis. I don't want. I think it's actually a win-win. It's not only a win for the landlord because it's being managed by a professional shop that knows the rules and regulations, but it's also good for the tenant as well. So where does it start, and how deep do your services go, and what does it cost?
Where does it start? It starts with a phone call. It starts with somebody having the need, somebody wanting to obviously no longer manage the properties themselves for a variety of reasons, whether it's they have more things with work, family, and whatnot. Where does it go? Once we take a mandate, we do a full due diligence on the property. We will make sure to check title, make sure who the owners are, make sure we have all the right signing parties. Beyond that, we'll do a full walkthrough of the party, make a list of things that need to be repaired on the property, start working with the landlord as to what the timelines are, make a maintenance plan for the property, because ultimately a property that is well maintained is going to require less capital injections that kind of surprise you, if you will. And it's also going to make a better living environment for the tenants. We're not going to have to put somebody up necessarily because we have a water leak and we have to relocate. We want to avoid all these major issues from happening. So that's kind of where it goes. And then after that, we obviously streamline finding all the tenants, doing all the background checks, criminal, rental board record, credit records. We verify everything to make sure that we have a solid tenant, and we mitigate our risk as much as possible to ensure that everything runs smoothly.
So something like we've just heard from David wouldn't have happened if the landlord had been using your services. You would have known to collect the 25% withholding tax. David wouldn't be in this situation. It'd be a win-win all around.
We offer it to all of our non-resident clients because we want to streamline it. We want to avoid difficult situations, right? So we have 2 clients who both had accounting backgrounds who wanted to manage it themselves. No problem. But I have it in writing that they're managing it themselves.
It sounds like the best option for a tenant is to rent an apartment from a landlord who is using a property management company. That's probably one way you can protect yourself in this situation, no?
It adds one more layer of protection, right? Because you now have a middleman who's verifying on both sides to make sure that everything's being done the right way.
Yep.
So is it a flat fee or percentage of rent?
So we do a percentage of rents. We'll charge 7% of gross rents.
Okay.
And then we basically just pass along any expenses that come along, whether it's a plumber, whether it's we're repairing the roof and whatnot. We're always available. There's a couple of emergency costs and attending the rental board. But in general, it's really a flat fee based on the gross rents.
So it's really worth its while then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if you're not living here. I mean, there's almost no other option.
When somebody who's not living here wants to manage it, who has a different time zone, who doesn't have the Rolodex of contacts, what most people are to this day most impressed with is that I'll usually be able to get somebody there within less than 24 hours. We're talking a roofer, electrician, plumber, people who are usually backed up for weeks at a time because of our relationships that they're going to come see it right away. I mean, generally we'll get a plumber there within 2-3 hours.
So if somebody wants to work with you, they have an apartment complex and they're like, you know what? I need to get in touch with LJ to make sure that I'm protecting myself and getting everything taken care of. How do they get in touch with you?
They can reach out to us at 514-709-6397.
Perfect. 12:30 is the time here on CJ 8800. You're listening to Under One Roof MTL. That's LJ Aguinaga from LJ Realties, Martin Spalding from Fred and Martin Mortgages. We are going to dive into real estate as a retirement strategy. Can individuals use real estate investments to plan for their retirement? We'll answer that question next.
Under One Roof MTL, hosted by Robin Flynn, featuring mortgage brokers Fred and Martin and real estate expert LJ Aguinaga. Presented by Fred and Martin Mortgages and LJ Realties. This is the Mortgage Minute.
What are the differences between an insured mortgage and a non-insured mortgage? This is your Mortgage Minute. The key differences between an insured and a non-insured mortgage revolves around the amount of the down payment and the insurance requirements. An insured mortgage requires mortgage default insurance because the down payment is less than 20% of the home's purchase price. This insurance protects the lender in case of default, but adds to the borrower's costs. Typically, this option allows buyers to qualify for a mortgage with a smaller down payment as little as 5%. A non-insured mortgage does not require mortgage default insurance as the down payment is 20% or more. This saves on insurance costs, but demands a higher outlay of upfront capital from the buyer. Non-insured mortgages often have a lower interest rate due to the reduced risk to lenders.
You're listening to Under One Roof MTL on CJ 8800. I'm Robin Flynn with Martin Spalding from Fred and Martin Mortgages, LJ Aguinaga of LJ Realties. Insured mortgages versus uninsured mortgages. I paid 20% down payment because I didn't want to have an insured mortgage. Do you guys think I made the right choice? Was that the right investment?
If you have the down payment to make, why not?
Exactly. That's what I thought. Guys, real estate as a retirement strategy. I am now approaching 40, and now is about the time when I'm starting to think about that eventual next phase in my life. My husband and I have been talking a lot about retirement the last couple of weeks. We own our own home.
Wait, hold on. You've been talking about retirement and you're 40?
Almost 40. You know what, guys? I would retire tomorrow if I could, because, I would keep doing this show, obviously, because it's so much fun. But, I'm a hobbyist. I love to garden. I love to read. I have tons of the stuff that I love to do. But we were looking ahead to what our options are. We own our own home. Presumably, it'll be paid off by the time we reach retirement age. I hope so. Is that a viable part of our retirement strategy? I mean, we've done a show before on reverse mortgages. I had never even considered that. So now that is something my husband and I have been discussing as an option down the road, which I think is really cool. And I appreciate that. Doing this show taught me something. But real estate as a retirement strategy, a lot of people, their house is their retirement strategy. They don't have any other income streams coming in. Is that the right way to approach your retirement?
It comes down to what you have accessible to you, right? Mm-hmm. So definitely having a home, you have an asset. It's going to continue going up in value. You're going to continue to pay down the debt. That's an excellent starting point. And if that's what you end up with at time of retirement, well, you're ahead of probably 40-50% of the population, which is fantastic. Obviously, the next step would then be to either diversify or start getting additional investments, Ideally, start with a small multiplex, whether it's a duplex or triplex, because there you're going to have perpetual income coming in. And in that same 25, 30 years that you pay down the property, at the end of it, you're going to be left with some maintenance costs, annual taxes, annual insurance, but the rest is just going to be income for you. Mm-hmm. And that's when you can really start planning longer term for, depending on the quality of life you're looking for through your retirement.
Because you often hear people talking about passive income.
Yep.
And so if you can pay down a triplex, let's say, and it's mortgage free, as LJ just mentioned, other than municipal school taxes, that rent could be your retirement fund.
Absolutely. I'm always hearing about multiple income streams. This is something that I'm a big believer in. Ever since I started my own business, multiple clients, multiple income streams. I do webinars. I sell digital products. I do absolutely everything because I'm so afraid that if one thing falls through, you have nothing, right?
Well,
and I think everybody should have multiple income sources at this point.
I think the big buzzword, and we were talking about it the other day, is that everybody needs a side hustle today. Mm-hmm. So your principal revenue stream is terrific. You've got a job or you've got a business.
Yep.
But it's always good to have a side hustle. And often these side hustles can become your principal hustles.
Yeah, you never know.
Because they're passion projects.
I have a question for you guys. So I was having a conversation with a friend this week, and this friend rents. They pay $2,000 a month in rent. And they were saying that they and their fiance were chatting and said even if they were in a position to buy right now, they're not. They don't have a down payment saved. They didn't want to. They rent an apartment, and she says, I love that I don't have to worry about absolutely anything. I have no lawn to mow. If something breaks in my apartment, I call somebody and they fix it. It's not my problem. I don't have to pay for any of the maintenance. I don't have to do absolutely anything. And I was like, maybe a condo might be an option for you. They have condo. And she says, no, I don't want to ever buy. I love that my rent is always the same. And I was like, but your rent goes up annually by a certain percentage. And she says, yeah, but how much are you spending to fix your HVAC system and whatever? I said, short term, maybe you're saving money because you don't have to make all these maintenance repairs. But long term, when you want to retire and you're still shelling out, how much is rent going to be in 30 years from now? And my house is paid off and I don't have to pay a monthly payment. I told her that I think owning long term is the best investment. Was I right to say that?
I would completely agree with you that on the long term, owning an asset is the best investment. I think that she probably came from a place where she's not in a position to do so right now. Right. It's probably easier to simply say, I would never want to do this, even if I was in a position. Maybe that just made it feel a little bit easier at the time. But one way or another, you're paying for things. And if you're going to call a landlord, why not call an HVAC technician or a plumber? You're calling somebody anyways, right? So having somebody come by, you're still being disturbed with the person coming by, organizing the timing of it, the scheduling of it, etc. You don't want a lawn? Buy a condo, no problem. So all of these things down the road, like you said, you're sitting on an asset. You're growing the equity on this property. It's going to continue to appreciate. Now, if she had said, look, I don't believe in real estate necessarily. I'm much more financially sophisticated when it came to the stock market. Right. And I put X amount into the stock market every single month. And that's my retirement plan because of X, Y, Z. Then so be it. There's a million and one ways where somebody can plan for retirement. And that's totally okay. It's not a one size fits all approach. Nevertheless, you need an approach.
You need an approach. Exactly. She's paying $2,000 a month. That's $500 more than my monthly mortgage payment. And I have double the square footage. So I feel like even short term, I'm just winning from a space standpoint. Right?
There's also a great feeling when you walk into the place knowing that it's yours.
Mm-hmm. I can do whatever I want. I can hang a poster and put holes in the wall if I want. Yesterday, my daughter got into the crayons and she colored all over the wall. I mean, Mr. Clean Magic Eraser will take care of it, so no need to panic. It's Crayola, it's washable, but it's my house. I don't have to worry. I don't have a landlord who's going to get mad.
You can have pets. You don't have to worry about a repossession. You're not going to get forced out at any point in time when you weren't planning it, weren't expecting it. There's a lot to be said about having control over where you live. And that was completely discounted in the conversation that you had.
It's also
Absolutely.
a great backstop. So, if things go sideways and you're sitting on an asset that has $500,000 worth of equity in it, you can sell it. And on $500,000 worth of equity, you can live a long time. So it's always... It's a good feeling to have that sort of like cushion. But, if things go sideways and you're renting and you haven't topped up your RRSPs, your TSFAs, and so on and so forth, this is instant liquidity that you can access if things go sideways in your life.
On that note, Martin, you actually bring up a client that we met with this week, actually, who has had his home for the last 12 years, had a great business, went into a new business the last 6 years, and in this most recent expansion, ran into some troubles with a partner and went into some cash issues, essentially. And is now, we sat down, built a whole plan, how we're looking to refinance his personal principal residence to access the cash, to get him out of this cash trouble right now. And he has this great backstop that he can rely on right now to get him out of this pickle, restabilize, and continue to grow his business moving forward.
Because had he been renting, this would not have been an opportunity or something that would have presented themselves to it.
Absolutely. We had, my husband and I, some debt a few years ago. We were able to refinance our home and pay down the credit card debt. And it was amazing. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was renting, and I would be still struggling to make credit card payments every month, which is no fun at all.
And your principal residence, we say this week after week, is that when you sell, you don't pay capital gains.
In Canada, it's huge. Completely free. In the U.S., there's caps on it, but in Canada right now, even if you were to profit $1 million on it, there is no limit to the capital gain exemption.
So it's still the greatest investment.
Amazing. You're listening to Under One Roof MTL on CJD 800. That's LJ. That's Martin. I am Robin. Still to come, our property of the week. Plus, we're going to have the answer to our trivia question of the week. What is the legal name for the welcome tax you pay when you purchase a property?
Under One Roof MTL, hosted by Robin Flynn, featuring mortgage brokers Fred and Martin and real estate expert LJ Aguinaga. Presented by Fred and Martin Mortgages and LJ Realties.
You're listening to Under One Roof MTL on CJD 800. Still to come, what we learned this week. We'll have a recap for you, but we always kick off this final segment of the show with our property of the week selected by LJ.
This week, I am going to highlight 4022 Rue Evangeline in Verdun. It's a beautiful two-bedroom condo offered at $589,000. This stunning unit, located on the second floor, is very well maintained, spacious at almost 1,050 square feet, and gets fantastic natural light because it faces out onto the aqueduct, so it's very dégagé, as we say in French. The main living area is open concept and can be arranged to suit any buyer's needs. The unit even has a large balcony facing away from the street, so on the back side of the building, perfect for enjoying the outdoors. On the front side, as we are facing the aqueduct with no front neighbors as well, we have tons of street parking. So basically it's a one-way with lots of ample options for us. When we're talking about my favorite restaurant in the area, it would have to be Beba.
Oh, yeah.
You been to Beba?
That's a really good one.
Never heard of that.
Excellent. So if you haven't heard of it, I highly recommend it. You should go check them out. And for a quicker meal, swing by Bosa for a stellar sandwich.
And Bosa, I believe, was named by, weren't they named by Cult MTL, one of the best places in the city to grab a sandwich?
It should be.
Yeah,
I believe
absolutely. Our trivia question of the week this week brought to you by Felix and Norton Cookies. What's the legal name for the welcome tax that you pay when you purchase a property? The correct answer, land transfer tax. We also would have accepted the Quebec legal name, which is droit de mutation. Karen was the first person to correctly text in the right answer. So Karen, check your text messages because soon you're going to have delicious Felix and Norton cookies delivered straight to your door. If you want to go check them out, they're in the Blue Haven Shopping Center on St. John's Boulevard in DDO. Guys, we learned a lot this week. We had our great conversation with David Siscoe off the top, talking about a very unfortunate situation where he found out he actually owes taxes to the Canadian Revenue Agency that his landlord was not paying.
To the tune of $43,000.
$43,000. So I learned, try to do your due diligence on your landlord. I mean, it can be really difficult if there's stiff competition for a unit that you're interested in, but do your best to protect yourself long term. You could maybe rent an apartment that's managed by a property management company to try to protect yourself. I also learned that real estate can be part of an effective retirement plan. We've also been getting a lot of questions about condos. I briefly briefly mentioned a friend who was renting and had no interest in purchasing. Guys, condos, is that an option that people should be considering? I know, Martin, you had a question.
Well, because I have a question for LJ. So before you buy a condo, so we're getting a lot of reaction about condos, horrible experience, this, that, and that. What should you do before you make your final offer to buy a condo? Should you contact the condo association? Is there literature? Are there budgets? Or what should you do to make sure you're getting into a good situation?
So for any time we're buying a condo representing a buyer, we have our document review clause, section 9.1 of the promise to purchase. And on there, we ask for a variety of things. Primarily, we'll ask for the last 3 years of financial statements, meeting minutes, deposits into the contingency fund, building rules and bylaws, and then we'll ask for taxes, insurance bill as well. For condos, it's super important because I've seen deductibles on condo buildings upwards of $150,000. With all the water issues we've had in buildings recently, you need to know what this deductible is because, God forbid, there is another water problem. You're going to be on the hook for it.
What about assessments? Should we...
Special assessments will be noted in the meeting minutes and in the financial statements. So you definitely want to look out for them. You also want to understand, why are the condo fees what they are, right? If you've been looking at a bunch of different properties and they've all had condo fees of about $400 a month, and this building has condo fees of $250 a month, but it's very similar, the math isn't mathing. All right, so just because it looks like a better deal from the condo fee perspective, chances are you're going to be hit with a couple of special assessments in the near future because there's been a couple of law changes over the last 2 years that require buildings to, first of all, have their building assessed and inspected every 5 years to make sure that it is well set up for the future and to understand what the upcoming costs are. So when is the roof going to be due? When are the windows going to be due? Foundation, brickwork, etc. And then from there, they take it one step further. How much is that going to cost when it comes due? Taking into account inflation. And then how much money do we have to put aside today or as of today so that we have those funds when the time comes? So it's called a building management plan. And you want to make sure the building has this in place. If it doesn't, is it in the works? Will it be coming out soon, etc.? And then along with that is deposits into the self-insurance fund. And this fund is to make sure that you have your deductible available in case there is something that happens. You don't have to start scrambling with all the co-owners in one shot. So above and beyond that, we ask for any renovation receipts available. We ask for the RIS form, which is basically a questionnaire that we send to the building management. Are there any lawsuits going on? Is there anything else that we need to be aware of? Are the condo fees up to date, etc.? And then if the property happens to be rented, we want any documents to the rental board, as well as a copy of the lease and the rent roll. So it's a very thorough document review process we have to go through. And then obviously it's reviewing all the documentation. It's fantastic to receive it all, but you have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, this is your biggest investment. So take the time to read through the documents and see if there are any traps that are presenting themselves. And also on the mortgage side, condo fees have an impact on the qualification process. And also, if the lender digs deep and they see that there's not a lot of money in the fund, they might question it because if the owner ever gets hit by a special assessment, do they have the means to pay that assessment?
And what is a special assessment? I'm ignorant over here. What does that mean? A
special assessment is, let's say the building turns out the roof was faulty and we have to replace the roof from one year to another. We did not prepare for this. We didn't know. This new roof is going to cost $100,000. So they are 20 property owners. We need a $5,000 check from everybody.
That can happen. That's not covered by your condo fees?
It's
supposed to be, I guess.
If everything is planned properly, 100%. But in the event that, mistakes happen, construction defects. We were looking at a building right now with a client where 15 years after construction, the building was hit with $240,000 of special assessments because there was a problem with the brickwork, water was coming in, there was a problem with the French drain, the foundation, etc. So things happen. It is construction, and every co-owner got a cash call, $31,000.
Oh, there was a wall around the perimeter of our old house, and the wall was falling down. And unfortunately, we had a good fund, but the fund could not afford to pay for the wall. So every tenant got hit with an assessment. I can tell you there were some tenants that were really upset about it.
Well, yeah, I would be too. I feel like...
But you don't have a choice. You got to fix it.
Well, of course. But that's part of what is a little scary maybe about owning a condo is you're kind of in it with other people, right? Like one person can't just opt out and say like, no, thank you. I choose not to contribute. What happens if you don't have the money? Like, what do? You have to refinance? What?
You refinance, you ask a family member, you either try to find the funds or else the board can put a lien on your property.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
I learned something every week on this show. This is amazing. I absolutely love it. Guys, if you ever have any questions for us, you can always get in touch with us. 514-800 for texting us live during the show. Of course, Under One Roof MTL can be heard every Sunday at noon right here on CJD 800. If you want to learn more about us, the show, you can visit our website at underoneroofmtl.com. You can also email us, info@underoneroofmtl.com. Send us your questions, suggestions for the show. We'd love to hear from you. You can even just say, hey, love the show. Love to listen to you guys every week. We love those kinds of messages.
Because we get a lot of questions during the show, and
we
unfortunately, we can't address them. But if you go to the website, send us a question, guaranteed you'll get an answer.
Absolutely. LJ, where can people get in touch with you?
The best place would be ljrealties.com or on any of the socials. My handle is LJ Aguinaga. You can also call or text 514-500-4040 or under the handle LJ Realties for the team.
Very, very cool. Martin, where can people get in touch with you and Fred?
Can I make a point about customer service? Because I had an awful customer service week.
Oh, no.
Where I was press 3, press 2, press 4. Ugh. Your call is important to us. So with Fred Martin, it's Fred Martin. So when you call Fred Martin, it's either Fred or Martin that answers the phone. And we will always answer the phone, no matter what time of day that you call. Or if you send us an email, we'll always respond. And there's no press 1, press 2, press 3, and wait 52 minutes to get in touch with a human being. So to reach us, fredmartin.com.
Amazing. If you missed anything, you can listen to the show. It's in entirety. It'll be available this afternoon as a podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, LJ.
Where can people reach you?
Oh, yeah. If people need help with social media.
Why don't you unpack what you do? We talk a lot about what we do, but we want to know what you do. What could you do for somebody that needs their help, some help with social media?
Social media is my jam, guys. I spend way too much time. My daily screen time report is a little embarrassing. So if you need help with your social media.
What did you say? 10 hours? Is that what you said?
About 8 hours a day. About 8 hours a day on my phone. But if you need help, you own a business and you have an Instagram and you want to transition over to TikTok, whatever. If you just need someone to consult with and help you have a plan for your social media, please get in touch with me. I have a website, robinflynn.com.
Are you Instagram or TikTok?
I am pro TikTok. I am TikTok all the way. That is where I spend most of my time, and it's where most people spend most of their time,
so next week we'll ask you about what you think is happening in the U.S. with the potential ban of TikTok.
I have very strong opinions about this. We'll have to talk about it next week. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. For LJ, Fred, and Martin, I'm Robin. This has been Under One Roof MTL.